Finding Your Power Identity. How to Awaken the Part of You That Cannot Be Governed by Fear, Guilt, or Shame. By Seth, the Red Neo, Chairpack. Introduction. The spell you didn't know you were under.
At some point, you learn to mistrust yourself. Not dramatically, not all at once, quietly, through correction, through comparison, through stories about who you were supposed to be. Now, when you hesitate, you assume it's fear, but fear doesn't argue with you. Fear doesn't shame you. Fear doesn't replay the past or predict punishment. Those voices learned their lines somewhere else, and they weren't written for your benefit. What most people call fear isn't actually the problem. Fear is biological, necessary, fast. Neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux demonstrated that fear is registered through subcortical brain pathways that activate before language, story, or conscious self-evaluation. Fear does not need identity. Fear does not argue. Fear does not shame. Fear responds to immediate threat and then shuts off. The emotions that don't shut off belong to a different category entirely. Developmental psychologist Michael Lewis showed that shame and guilt only appear once a self-concept forms and social evaluation is internalized. Infants feel fear long before they are capable of shame. Anthropology confirms this divide. Ruth Benedict's cross-cultural research revealed that guilt-based and shame-based emotional systems vary dramatically by culture, while fear responses remain constant. If an emotion changes by culture, it isn't a signal from reality. It is learned. Clinical psychology reaches the same conclusion from another direction. Research on moral injury by Brett Litz and others found that persistent fear and anxiety are most strongly linked not to danger, but to unresolved guilt, shame, betrayal, and grief. Fear follows judgment. Fear does not initiate it. Affective neuroscience adds another layer. Jaak Panksepp's mapping of primary emotions does not include resentment at all. Resentment emerges when instinct, anger, and grief are suppressed and turned inward. Fear is the alarm. Grief, guilt, shame, and resentment are the spells that keep pulling the alarm when there is no fire. That distinction matters because grief, guilt, shame, and resentment are not natural regulators of survival. They only function when an internal judge has been installed. Fear is not the enemy. Fear is the scapegoat. Before you had language for it, before you had memory for it, something began lingering in the background of your life. A quiet spell. A web of invisible meanings about who you are, what you're worth, what's allowed, and what isn't. The spell didn't announce itself. The spell didn't ask permission. The spell simply felt like reality. That is how a spell works. Not as a single lie, but as a lattice of stories, judgments, and emotional reflexes so familiar you stopped noticing them. You call these patterns thoughts. You call these patterns feelings. You call these patterns just how I am, but none of them were original or natural. Every system that requires obedience must first do one thing: convince you that your identity is negotiable, conditional, and flawed. Once that belief is accepted, behavior follows automatically. No force required. This book exists because something in you has already started to notice the distortion. This book exists to help you recognize the spell. New subheader: the moment you realize that you're living someone else's story. At some point, usually long after the spell has taken hold, a crack appears. You notice that your life feels scripted. You notice that fear arrives on cue. You notice that self-doubt sounds suspiciously rehearsed. You notice that the rules you are following were never consciously chosen. You begin to see that much of what you call your personality is actually a role shaped by expectation, comparison, and repetition. The story you are living did not start with you. It was handed to you, and the moment you recognize that even faintly, you are no longer fully inside it. Recognition weakens the spell. New subheader: Why fear took the blame for problems it didn't create. Fear isn't your enemy. Fear is biological, ancient, precise. Fear exists to keep you alive in real danger. The problem is not fear. The problem is that fear has been summoned where no danger exists. What actually governs you are quieter, heavier forces that arrive first. Grief that was never metabolized, guilt that was never earned, shame that was never yours, resentment that had nowhere to go. These are not natural emotions in the way fear is natural. Fear is a biological signal. Grief, guilt, shame, and resentment are learned overlays. They do not arise from immediate danger or direct experience the way fear does. They are installed through language, repetition, moral framing, and story. They are taught, reinforced, and rewarded by systems that benefit from self-doubt and self-policing. Once installed, these spells manufacture fear where none is required. They create vigilance without threat, submission without force, and obedience without chains. Fear then gets blamed for what these spells are doing. You do not need to eliminate fear. You need to see what is summoning fear. New subheader: What changes when you spot the spell instead of fighting yourself? Most approaches try to change thoughts, or heal emotions, or regulate the body. Those methods shift state. They do not change structure. The spell lives deeper than mood, insight, or sensation. The spell is woven into how meaning is assigned. The spell shapes how you interpret yourself. The spell determines worth before thought even appears. When you stop fighting yourself and start observing the spell, something radical happens. Self-blame collapses. The inner war quiets. Energy returns. Not because you tried harder, but because the false authority was removed. This book is not here to give you new beliefs. This book is here to make certain old beliefs impossible to maintain. Once you see the spell, you cannot unsee it. And once the spell breaks, it does not return disguised as self-improvement. This is the threshold. You are not here to be fixed. You are here to remember what was buried before the spell ever took hold.
Question and action. Question: Where do you hear grief, guilt, shame, or resentment speaking as if it's you? Action: Notice one phrase you use to describe yourself that feels like it came from this spell about fear, and do not argue with it or judge it. Just see it. End of the introduction of Finding Your Power Identity by Seth Cherpak.